Welcome, everyone. This is Glenda Dawson, and you're watching Glenda's Dragon's Den. And we have my special co-host who's been with me for a little bit now, and she'll continue.
Peekaboo!
As long as she keeps saying yes, I'll continue having her.
I'm so like Glenda. Do you think you would get rid of me that easily? Come on now.
I don't know. We did
No.
have somebody already, saying that I shouldn't have you, that I stole you.
Oh, well, listen, you know what? You can't kidnap me against my will if it's Glenda. That's not something that's happening. I'm like, Glenda's going to take me? Okay. Oh, no. How terrible. Glenda, take me away. I'm just, poor me.
Poor you. Cry a little more. The violins.
Cry a little. There you go. Hello, and welcome to Brien. I'm going to let Glenda do her little intro. I'm excited for this.
Brian Rube, he is fantastic, phenomenal. I actually met him at Meetup, which is one of the places where I find a lot of great meetings, but his are always really good. And unfortunately, I can't always make them because, grandmother here, so she's got grandmother duties usually when he has them. But I try to catch them, and I really enjoyed all the meetings and that I've been able to. So, Brian, tell us and our audience all about you.
Well, sure. It all goes back to the last day of the 1950s. That's when I was born. I came from.
I love it. Start from the very beginning.
Yeah. So I grew up in small town, Ontario, Fontville, Ontario, not too far from Pennsylvania. I've been there. And I guess my first paranormal experiences began when I was around 5. I would have the paralysis experience. So prior to astral travel, people feel a vibrational state, paralysis, and then the separation. So I was quite scared about this as a kid. I'd cling to the side of the bed and to prevent myself from leaving my body. This was a recurring experience for a few years as a kid. It was a deep personal mystery at the time, and I didn't discuss. It wasn't until I was 15 I read Robert Monroe's book on journeys out of the body. I realized, oh, that's what that was. It was just about astral travel. I don't think it had anything to do with.
I have read. That's so fascinating. So is this an experience that you still have? Can you maybe describe for the audience or anyone who maybe is interested in the astral travel kind of stuff? Look at you doing that just naturally as a kid and not even knowing it.
Yeah, I could have developed the talent, but the fear barriers, the tough part to get over. Then after I studied it when I was 15, I only succeeded once when I was 16 of leaving my body just in the bedroom, and I was trying to turn on the light, and my finger was going through the switch like this, and I was getting frustrated. And then I went back in my body, but that's all I ever succeeded in doing. But I don't think it had anything to do with aliens. I never saw aliens in my bed or anything. I think it was just more about the astral travel, vibrational state. So, but it would just come and go in my teens and 20s, and that faded away. I don't have that experience anymore. So I'd like to bring it on. So at least that was my first paranormal thing that happened to me,
Nice.
That is fascinating. I love that. I feel like there's conversations we could have all day long about what did this mean in childhood. That's kind of my favorite. Yeah. Did you kind of move away from it, or maybe that kind of
left me with a view of consciousness beyond the body? I always believed in life after death. I wasn't raised in any religious belief. My parents left the Catholic Church when I was 5, and my father was a spiritual seeker. We got into meditation when I was 14. Different spiritual interests, but nothing was really forced on me. But I was always open to it. I always believed in consciousness beyond the body, and I always accepted UFOs since I was a kid. I thought, well, this is a reality. It's very significant. Aliens from outer space. I always took it quite seriously since I was a kid. I never doubted it.
Yeah. It's amazing that you say you were having those experiences naturally, because you were probably made a deal that when you came here, you would not forget how to do that. The fear that people put on you, humanity puts on kids and anybody who experiences anything out of what they consider the norm, is probably what stopped you, which you probably could get it back if you just focus now.
Yeah, maybe, yeah.
But I do. It's such a a kind of a unique experience in the sense of having that deep understanding of like UFOs, E.T.s, and other, you know, star clusters that would have intelligent life like us, and just not being afraid of it. Because I think that's such the big thing when it comes to disclosure or talking about, you know, extraterrestrials or extra dimensional beings, anything like that, you know, any of those topics, people shy away from it out of fear because it's something that has been sort of suppressed and considered to be, you know, anywhere from wooey woo crazy to, you know, being totally fearful, or, you know, people who are like thinking that it's demons and things like that. Right. So it is a unique experience. So from when we were maybe like 16 or so, then having that natural, like, lack of fear when it comes to those things, did you, like, when did it start that you were kind of having the interactions that you have? I mean, I know you said you started the Buddhist study, like, tell us more then from the 15, 16 on. Where do we start to talk to our friends from the stars?
Yeah, well, I guess significant change for me happened when I was 17. I had done some meditation for a while, and I read a book called Handbook to Higher Consciousness by Ken Keyes Jr. And this really set me off in the spiritual phase, and I started spontaneously channeling and doing a lot of writing. So this is the summer of 1977 when I was 17. So I was writing like notebooks of stuff and getting this whole channeling phase. It's really like the most glorious period of my life. This was this higher realm period. And my parents were pretty understanding. They just sort of tolerated. And this went on for months. But then it faded out, and then I didn't know what to do. I went back to high school to grade 13. We had that in Ontario, and it faded away, and I wanted to know, how do I get that back? And then it came back when I was 19 for another summer. I wrote 200,000 words, all these channel writings. But it was a mystery to me. It wasn't until I became a Buddhist in 1991, and I was initiated in like Buddhist higher realm channeling practices, that I realized more the mechanical structure of how you go about doing this, how you set up the environment, and the practices you do to bring it on artificially to generate it. So before that, it was just a mystery what it was. And when I became a Buddhist, I realized, oh, that was channeling. That's what I was doing. But no one at the time told me what it was. And my father, he was into spiritual things, you know, but he never recognized it as channeling. But my parents were quite tolerant at the time, you know.
Yeah. I mean, that is also a unique experience too, though, that you were in an environment where you weren't sort of told not to do that because it was strange, you know. And also, so have you been able to receive any maybe information or like looking back just for your own hindsight, any reason why it sort of went in and out for you, like in that? Because it seems like as a kid, it went in and out. And then as you started channeling and writing, it kind of would come and go. Yeah. I mean, is there any kind of reasoning for that, or anything that you've kind of extrapolated out of why it had to be that way?
Yeah, usually it arose when I was in a calm state, when life was doing good and I had time for my contemplation and reflection. Usually a time when there wasn't much stress in my life, things are going good, then these phases just sort of come over me. I get this inspired state. It would usually come on gradually. I describe it as like a tide, a rising tide. It would come gradually over a period of a few days. You could feel it coming on, you know, and I realized, oh, I'm on now. So then I would tend to write. I would tend to withdraw a bit and write. Yeah, so that would come and go. Like I remember different ages when I was 21 and 26. Then a couple times in my 30s, you know, would come and go. Yeah. But now, like from a Buddhist view, the Buddha, he didn't actually recommend channeling. He said it can lead to mental derangement in the channeler. And sometimes I went too far with it, and I was a bit crazy. So it's not something I try to do too much. I just do it sometimes if I feel I need some inspiration or want to contact the higher realms. But it's not something I would do every day.
Yes, it is training. It does train you. Usually I found that I actually need some chocolate afterwards.
Hey, I'm like the Dementors from Harry Potter, right? You got to have a bar of chocolate. It's just, again, not the terrifying they're trying to do it. They just have a different vibration than you do. And so it's a lot for you to get up there and meet them. It's an effort in that regard, sort of.
Well, I eat chocolate all through my life. I'm very inclined towards chocolate.
There you go. I know a lot of channelers that have to have their chocolate afterwards.
Yeah, I come from a Dutch family. We always like Dutch chocolate.
Oh, there you go. Like, I love that as a treat. Oh man, I haven't had Dutch chocolate in a long time. Do we need to, Glenda? Now we need to travel. Go over to Belgium. We got to get some chocolate, some Belgian chocolates, and then we got to go to Holland and get some Dutch chocolates. We need to like go do a world tour. Brian, are you down?
Sure, absolutely.
I love it. Here we go. We're going on a world tour.
So now you got initiated into Buddhism and all that other stuff. And how does that tradition interface with the UFOs and your experiences?
Yeah, it does. Like the Buddha described 31 planes of existence. He described the centrosphere in heaven. There's 6 levels of the centrosphere, and beyond that, the devas, there's the Brahmas, which is these vast godlike beings, and then there's a formless realm. So the Buddha was quite detailed about all these different levels of heaven, and they're all like different dimensions or states of consciousness. When you're meditation, you can actually reach these levels. So I always had an interest in how Buddhist cosmology relates to extraterrestrials or UFOs. There's even one discourse the Buddha describes the first heaven and centrosphere. He says, cars fit for gods to have as well. So gods means like the deva. So actually distinguish the car, the vehicles that the devas fly around in, which can be like an E.T. and a UFO. So in Buddhist countries, UFOs are not considered that strange or unusual. Like in our culture, kind of threatens your very nature of reality. Yeah, so in Buddhism, we accept the higher realm stuff. And I was trying to get more of a Buddhist perspective on it. Like my first book I published in 1999, a chapter called Buddhism and UFOs. And I think Buddhism can add a lot to ufology, and ufology can learn from Buddhism. But it's hard to get Buddhist monks to talk about it. I had one monk in Ontario, actually I put it down, we did a video with me on it. But people thought, oh, that's kind of weird, monk talking about UFOs. So a lot of them are conservative and reluctant to discuss it, even though they don't know it's part of their cosmology. But in the West, people are more interested in meditation, stress reduction, things like that. Cosmology doesn't really interest Western Buddhists so much, but it always drew me. The cosmology is what really fascinated me about Buddhism. Yeah.
It sounds like you were able to put everything together. That's why I asked you, because I know a lot of Buddhists that stay away from the cosmology part of it, and I'm like, but that's part of it. And that's why I kind of missed.
So can I ask you? You mentioned the idea of like the vessels or the ships that the Buddhists talk about, higher realm beings coming. Can you talk a little bit about that? Because the thing that comes to me immediately is the idea of like a Merkaba, right? Like activating your own Merkaba. It's sort of an energy, like your energy body, and utilizing that as a travel vessel, right? And that's something that I know that a lot of other channelers talk about. So I don't know if that's something that you can get into and the Buddhist perspective on sort of like using your Merkaba.
Well, there's even a discourse about it's called the Atanata Sutta. He described even Deva cities. One was called Alakamanda, a Deva city. So they're actually floating in the atmosphere, floating above us, these Deva cities. And, Deva vehicles would come in and out of them. So the Buddha described these various floating cities, even one with the yakas. Yakas are actually the Sasquatch, the Bigfoot that's described in Buddhist cosmology. And he described how Vimanas is the term for the vehicles. The Devas float around. He described some Vimanas that would hold 100 or 1,000 different Devas. So these would be like large spaceships, That's part of the Buddhist teachings. Because the Buddha was called the knower of the worlds. He knew the cosmology, knew the universe, and from his own direct experience. So he did describe these things floating around in our atmosphere.
This fascinates me. I'm so excited that you mentioned Bigfoot. I didn't know everything that in the world that I love so much came together so beautifully with Buddhism. I love Sasquatch, Loch Ness. Talk to me about all these things. Like Buddhism has perspectives on my favorite cryptids. I did not know this. How very exciting.
Yeah, the Yaka, the Buddha described the Bigfoot as a Yaka. It's also translated as a Yaksha in Sanskrit, which sounds a bit more like Sasquatch. And the Buddha described them as big, hairy, stinky creatures, they're an interdimensional type of Deva. I mean, they come from the lower first heaven and centrosphere, and then they can phase into our existence. You see them physically, which explains why you never find a Sasquatch bones or remains, because they're interdimensional. They phase in and out of our existence. There's even a discourse called The Questions of King Melinda given, it was 3 centuries after the Buddha. There was this enlightened monk named Nagasena who spoke to a Greek king in India. And the king asked him, is it true that these yakas really exist? And Nagasena, yes, king, it's true. And he described how they're interdimensional beings that phase in and out. That's why you can see them, but you never find a body. You can't get your hands on any remains. And the Buddha actually described them as they can be quite dangerous. There's protection chants he gave to protect you. If you're a monk meditating in the forest, you're attacked by a yaka, you do these various chants, so the devas would come and protect you. So they can be dangerous. There can be good yakas and bad yakas. Versus Bigfoot.
Well, just like humans, right? Some of them mean well and some of them not so much.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah, and the Naga as well. The Naga is like a serpent-like creature, like dragon-like or a serpent, and they like water, like the Loch Ness Monster. Here in British Columbia, Canada, here we have the Ogopogo Monster in Okanagan Lake, and there's like in Chinese history, there's like 1,000 lakes where people would see these Nagas, so they're believed to be a type of deva, also in the first 7 of the central sphere. Mm-hmm. But it's not regarded, it's not the same as reptilians. I used to wonder if these were reptilians, but no, because Nagas, they generally don't interfere in human affairs. They're not that interested in controlling us. But it seems the reptilians are a type of being that gets involved with the globalists and try to control the world, like the David theory. So reptilians and Nagas are probably 2 different things.
I think so. And the Nagas to me are more peaceful, more, okay, I do my thing, you do your thing. And I show up if you need help. That's been what I have experienced. Is like, if you ask for help, one of them shows up and somehow gives you the energy that you need at that moment. But, and you have to be very high vibrational, in a very high vibrational frequency at that moment to see them. Because they could be right in front of you, and somebody could say, there it is. And you're like, where? But you have, at that moment, you have to be in a very calm, meditative, kind of like a divine type of level.
Most people can't see devas, but like ghosts, on contrast, some people do see ghosts. They're regarded as like a lower realm being. Right. It's called an afflicted spirits. Devas are happier, they're higher.
Right.
Exactly. But it's more common for people to see a ghost than a deva. It's quite rare to have the ability to see devas.
Right. Yes. It's kind of like the same thing as seeing the archangels in their real state. Everybody says, oh, here's the picture. This is how we see them, but not in their real state, where I've been very blessed to be able to be in that frequency, to actually see them in their real state. Yes.
Well, it's great you can do that. I can't say I've ever seen a deva. Like, I've felt I've channeled to them. Like, I would get mental impressions, thought impressions, from outside of myself. Right. But I've never actually seen one. So that's
I actually see it third eye and regular eyes. Like, over suddenly they could appear right here, and I'm like, oh, okay, that's so and so. Got it. Yeah. So
how can you, like, am I allowed to delve into that? How do they appear, and what do you, like, Glenda, what do you see when you see them? And then Brian, when you have a third eye experience of them, what is it like? What are your different perceptions, each of you, when you do experience those beings?
When I was a child, they appeared like the pictures the drawings that everybody makes, just not to scare people, not to scare the child. But as I grew older, I see them in their real way of being, which is, some of them could be pretty scary. It's like if you saw a gray, or if you saw a reptilian or something like that, you would be like, your brain can't handle that.
The difference,
the appearance. That's
okay.
Yeah. But they still have that resonance. They still have that energy, and when they arrive, you can feel that loving energy. So it's like it calms you down right away, no matter how they appear to you.
Well, I mean, that's so tell me how you experience them then when you have the third eye experience, because this is fascinating to me. I have my own experiences, of course. Like right now I'm thinking of, like, when I was a kid, I would call them nightmares, that I was having these really scary dreams. But for a long time now, I've been like, I think I was being communicated with by, like, my team, my fam, my star peeps and whoever, and just misunderstood it because didn't have any context for it. And certainly fear around those things is prevalent in the area where I grew up. And so the pocket of consciousness I'm in didn't have a whole lot of space to let things like that in a safe kind of way. But so like when you see them then or perceive the energy or with your third eye, what is that experience like for you, Brian?
Well, for me, it's definitely a heightened state of consciousness. And my energy is quite heightened too, kind of like a manic state, like the typical manic depressive type of experience. And for me, it's a series of thought impressions coming from the outside. Like it's obviously not my own thoughts. Like, of course, in ordinary experience, you wonder, where do thoughts come from? My thoughts pop in your head all the time, but it's quite a heightened state. Some are quite brilliant ideas, really good ideas. That's why I would tend to write them down. So that's how I experience the presence of a higher realm type of a being. I've never actually seen anything, but orbs are believed to be devas from a Buddhist view. Like people see orbs sometimes, and the Buddha even described prior to his enlightenment, he would just see orbs of light, but when it became more enlightened, would actually see the shape of the deva, the form of the deva. They look kind of humanoid, but very, very bright, very luminous, very beautiful type of things. But when people see orbs flying around, it's likely a conscious entity of some kind, probably a deva.
I'm thinking of like Leonardo da Vinci's, what's his name, man, called The Dude in the Circle, right? Like that's what I'm thinking now. So now I want to talk to Da Vinci. Like, hey man, were you drawing one of those things? Were you seeing this stuff? Is that what you're doing? Can we channel Da Vinci? Guys, can we get on that and can we channel Da Vinci through and just ask him, were you talking to some ethereal beings and you just didn't tell anybody? You just drew the stuff? That's cool.
Yeah, maybe he's taking reverse somewhere. Maybe he's a human now, or maybe he's an E.T. Who knows where he is 500 years.
Exactly.
Yeah, that's very true. Like, hey, Da Vinci, where are you existing at in the quantum multiverse right now? Come and talk to us in whatever form you come in your current time-space pie slice. How fun.
Yeah.
So what else can you tell our audience about your experiences?
Well, I'd say, 2006 is when I really got into UFOs, because that's when YouTube was invented in 2005, and my roommate told me about it in 2006, and I just had an interest in UFOs, so I typed in UFOs and got all these documentaries. So I was shocked, stunned, and amazed. You used to have to wait for a TV show on UFOs to show up every few months. You read the TV guide, this is interesting. But now with YouTube, there's hundreds of hours of video. So that's when I really entered into the UFO community. And in 2007, I joined UFO BC, which is a local Vancouver UFO investigation groups. And then I started my UFO meetup in 2009. So that's when I really got immersed. And then, and with my meetup group, we typically have meetings with 20 people in person. And I met experiencers, people have been abducted by aliens, and people just had a lot of knowledge and tutored me on this. And that's when I really got into the whole UFO scene. I was like the main person in the UFO scene in Vancouver. So that really sort of propelled my studies and experiences with other people who really had these experiences. So that's what really got me into that. And then I decided, this is the most important issue in the world. Extraterrestrials are visiting Earth, have some influence on Earth. And then I started seeing David Jacobs' videos and Bud Hopkins talking about the abduction experience. So I remember where I was in 2009, where I was walking when my mind shifted, and I decided that the abduction was for real. Before that, I had my doubts. Could this be for real? But after enough investigation, I decided, it's part of my worldview, and I really believe this. So it took me a while to really study it and really, take it seriously and really believe it. So that's been a big interest of mine, the whole sort of ET human hybrid program. That's the evidence indicates this is what's going on. So I think that's what the whole UFO phenomenon is all about. And it took us decades to even consider that possibility.
So the thing that I'm thinking of right now, I don't know how familiar you might be with Graham Hancock or his sort of theories when it comes to. His book Visionary.
They came to Vancouver. Yeah, I've read his book, Magician of the Gods. I read about 300 pages.
Okay.
So a lot of his talks. Yeah.
So talk to me a little bit about this then. Maybe you've got some more kind of channel details. He does kind of have this sort of, I guess, theory that he presents that people who are shamans, right, Glenda, in other cultures are when they describe experiences that they have with deities or what they consider to be gods that they name, that the experiences they describe are very parallel to what people describe who say they are alien abductees in this like alien human hybrid program. And that when you look at things like fairy lore and mythological creature lore, right, like the same thing kind of like with fairies and those kind of creatures, you have that sort of, you know, they take you away to fairyland and you think you're gone for 3 days and it's been 300 years, right? Like a similar kind of thing, but like also the idea of, you know, babies that are taken by fairies and replaced by, what am I thinking? Like a changeling baby, right? That like, right. So that there are similar throughout different cultures and different, you know, I guess levels of civilization, quote unquote, maybe technology or medicine, right? That based on kind of the culture where you are, interaction with fairies or, you know, gods from shamans or E.T.s in Western culture, the experiences are all actually very parallel. And it might just be that, you know, your perception of the being or energy you're experiencing is being filtered by, you know, your worldview. So can you talk maybe a little bit about that, how there's these sort of parallels and maybe you've got more information again on this between fairy lore and the alien hybrid program, and again, you know, the things that shaman from ancient cultures experienced and the alien hybrid program, and if time isn't real, are they just kind of existing through all, like, you know, it sounds like ancient aliens kind of stuff, but they really have been around hanging out with us forever because we're all just together in this infinite now.
Yeah, I think they agree with Hancock's thesis is basically right, and he also took DMT, did experiments with DMT and the shamanic view of aliens. Yeah, it's probably true that some of them are actually witnessing aliens. Like on DMT, some people would actually see gray aliens specifically. So I think, yeah, Gray and Hancock did a lot of you know, work opening the door to that. So I think it's true. Different cultures have different ways of experiencing. Like various Native Indian tribes in America as well as Africa have had relationship with the aliens. Some relating to specific stars. I mean, I haven't experienced that myself. I've just researched it and studied it a lot. Like the Dolan tribe in Africa relate to the star Sirius. They say they come from Sirius, and it's the brightest star in the sky. So and they even described that the sun and Sirius is a binary star, with one smaller than the other. And we find out, you know, just decades ago, this is actually true, and they've known that for centuries. Yeah. So yeah, that's true. I guess another thing I learned from Gray and Hancock is that like 12,800 years ago, there was probably comet fragments hitting the north of Canada and Europe, which wiped out probably an advanced ancient civilization that existed prior to that. So yeah, I think there was probably several previous advanced civilizations. That's a major area of my studies is advanced ancient global civilizations. I've done interviews and a lot of videos about that as well. Yeah, so Gray and Hancock did a lot of work to open that up, you know, with the Younger Dryas, that period of time.
Yeah, that's definitely a subject that's in my wheelhouse. I am fascinated by those things. So like, it's interesting to me. I've never tied Buddhism into all of these different, you know, cryptids and the Graham Hancock and alien. I don't. So like, this absolutely fascinates me that there's this whole other, I mean, I'm of course aware of Buddhism and a lot of people are, and maybe you can talk about that because you and Glenda had kind of been talking about that just a little bit beforehand, the idea that not all Buddhists do adhere to that or kind of maybe speak about it. I don't know. Maybe you can talk a little bit about that and like, why is that not more prevalent that it's linked like that?
Like Christian cosmology, like the teachings of Jesus is pretty brief, like Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. You can write on a couple of napkins, but the Buddha's discourses are 6,000 pages long, and he taught for 45 years. So there's a very detailed description of the heavens. Like Jesus taught, well, there's a heaven, and then I think around 1000 AD, the Christians fleshed it out a bit more, you know, more of a concept of angels. But this comes right from the Buddha, this whole cosmology of all these different levels of Davis. But in the West, there's organizations who brought sort of Buddhist meditation to the West, like the Insight Meditation Society. They're mainly just focused on meditation practice. So in the West, people think of Buddhism as stress reduction, meditation, you know, loving kindness practice. But I guess Buddhists were kind of cautious bringing it to the Western mind. A lot of them were already burned by religion. They left religion. They didn't want religion. So I think a lot of Western Buddhist teachers were reluctant to bring in heaven and hell. We've got all that too, heaven and hell on different levels. So they tend to shy away from that just to bring people in. So meditation is a great way to introduce it to Westerners. So I think Buddhist teachers are shy. A lot of people or Western teachers don't really even study the cosmology, probably don't know about it. But if you go, like I was in Thailand, I was a Buddhist monk in Thailand, and it's part of their culture. They know about ghosts and devas. They have little shrines to various devas, so it's really part of Buddhist culture. But in the West, these are like the pioneer centuries of Buddhism in the West, so a lot of Westerners don't even think about the cosmology. But it's all through the Buddhist discourses, the suttas. He talks about the devas again and again, and he said you should be mindful of devas. It's definitely very much a Buddhist worldview. And I'm a Theravada Buddhist with like Thailand, Burma, Sri Lanka. It's like the old school of Buddhism. Then there's Mahayana Buddhism, which is a bit different. But cosmology is definitely traditionally a serious part of our whole Buddhist worldview, And there's good devas and there's bad devas. There's the jealous gods and there's the Maras. Maras, like the evil one in Buddhist cosmology, comparable to Satan. And Mara lives in the high heaven, the sixth heaven, the central sphere, so he can influence you and turn you astray or tempt you, So we have that force as well in Buddhist cosmology, like positive and negative higher realm forces.
And that's really interesting. And so maybe you could talk a little bit more about that. That fascinates me, the idea of because obviously with Christianity, it's a very sort of duality, the way that it's set up, right? The dogma of Christianity, you've got angels and demons. And this is something that I have such a fascination with, right? Like, well, they're all just trying to exist and they all just are their own beings. They don't necessarily have to just because you are put in demon category doesn't mean that you mean bad things for people. Maybe that's a misconception. Right. So maybe you can talk a little bit about more of this for me, because this is a subject that does also fascinate me, the way that humans kind of categorize different beings and maybe our tendency to kind of have misconceptions about them because we put our projections on them rather than kind of being able to understand what their intentions might be or how they perceive themselves.
Yeah, sure. There's only two things a person really needs to have a conviction about to be a Buddhist, and that's karma and rebirth. So rebirth and all these different realms of existence, and karma is your intentional actions have results. So negative karma has results, positive karma has results. The Buddha taught you can take rebirth in any one of these 5 realms depending on your karma. Like the lowest realms there's the hell realm, the ghost realm, or the animal realm. The animal realm is the only other realm you can see. Then there's the human realm or the deva, the god realm. So that's really the central core concept of Buddhism is karma and rebirth and like past lives and future lives. So we have a very long view of time, like millions of years, millions of lifetimes. Like the Buddha described, your past life has no beginning. There's no concept of a beginning in the Buddhist universe or cosmology. Like we've been around here kind of forever. And you keep taking rebirth until you achieve full and complete enlightenment, like the Buddha. When you become an arhat, fully enlightened, then you don't have to go through the inconvenience of taking rebirth again. But until then, you can take rebirth into more pleasant states of within samsara, either in the human realm or as a deva in the higher heavens, and eventually you attain full and complete enlightenment. So that's the big overview of how it goes. But there's good and bad devas. The Maras, like Mara has like his army. Like it's interesting, the Bible describes the devil and the devils, like this whole administration of devils. And in Buddhist cosmology, you have Mara and the Mara. The Mara has this whole extensive administration, you could say, of devas that try to trip you. Mara's not entirely bad. He just doesn't want you to get enlightened. So Mara try to prevent you from getting enlightened. He wants to be part of his program, kind of like a Madison Avenue sales executive is trying to promote his products and getting you to buy his products. So Mara wants to keep you in samsara, prevent you from getting enlightenment. But it's not all bad. It's not like the idea of the devil in hell, with flames coming out of his ears. It's a different idea. But it's real in Buddhist cosmology. So that's one of the cautionings about channeling. When you're channeling, you're not sure what you're getting. You could get a misleading Deva, giving you mendacious advice, misleading you. That's why you have to be very cautious about these things. That's why, as a Buddhist practitioner, you're working on your own mind, your meditation practice, trying to purify yourself. You shouldn't be relying too much on the Devas. It's not like we're praying to God or praying to Devas all the time. You have to be more self-reliant. Also, in Buddhist cosmology, there's no idea of a personal God. There's no one big personal God at all in Buddhist cosmology. Like there's just natural laws in the universe, like the law of cause and effect, and karma is like the law of cause and effect in the moral dimension. So being a Buddhist means trying to understand natural laws and work in harmony with them. And of course, if you have good karma, if you do good actions, more good comes to you. So you try to restrain yourself with good ethics and have as much moral virtue as you can, and keep developing your mind. But Buddhists, we're not praying to God. We don't have that idea. So it's quite different than Christianity.
Mm-hmm. So the thing that's kind of, I wonder if you could dive into it a little bit more, the idea of kind of, because it is the fearful part, right? And the part that I think humanity needs to get over just a little bit. The idea of like the bad E.T.s are kind of coming to get us, right? So, but you're talking about the idea of like someone who's just selling a product and like, yeah, a car salesman's going to push his sales pretty hard, right? So maybe can you talk a little bit about, and I don't know if maybe you've channeled anything or you've kind of got messages on this topic, but humans being able to get in a space where they don't become so personally entangled with that sort of, call it the ego, call it the inner critics, that sort of Satan element, if you will. Are there things that people can do who are interested in these subjects and willing to approach them in that way? Like what sort of study or what sort of practice might you direct people to if you are trying to be in a space of just understanding that like that entity is just a certain kind of energy and you don't have to become caught up in a lot of the negative loops that humanity tends to get caught up in when it comes to like ego or that inner critic, right? Or the idea of like the Satan element in our consciousness, if you will. So maybe you could talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, I guess the first thing I'd say is that it's virtue that protects you. So if you practice virtue, it protects you from negative entities as well, like ghosts or negative entities. Virtue itself protects you. And the whole sort of daily practice in Buddhism is trying to uproot unwholesome mental states, generate more wholesome states, like getting into bad mood or you feel like a negative entity is near you that arouses more unwholesome mental states. For instance, the contemplation on loving kindness called metta meditation. That's actually my main meditation practice. It's really good for dispelling any kind of negativity, like aversion, like even depression is a form of aversion. So, the Buddha highly recommended the meditation on loving kindness. And online, there's lots of guided meditations on loving kindness. So the idea is you're constantly keeping vigil of your mind, watching your thought patterns, trying to dispel negative, unwholesome thoughts, trying to develop more positive, wholesome thoughts. So that's what Buddhist meditation is, like the formal sitting meditation practice. You're constantly watching your thoughts, coming back to the breath or whatever the object is. But all throughout the day, you should always be kind of keeping vigil over your mind. So really, you have some control over your mind and your thoughts. It's really about directing your thoughts. So you can sort of one step at a time develop more wholesome thoughts, like undermine your negative, unwholesome thoughts. So it's all really about purifying your mind. But you're really in control from a Buddhist view. Like there's not really external factors controlling you, and it's really your own karma that comes back to you, good and bad. So when things happen to you, it's generally the result of your own karma. That's why there's not much blame in Buddhism. You don't blame others or blame the universe so much. It's more sort of self-responsibility for your mental states. But it's really all about working with your own mental states and trying to develop your mental states, purify your mind more.
Yes, taking responsibility. Taking responsibility and accountability.
Yeah.
I mean, that's, I think, where the community stuff comes in, though, because as humans, we are meant to be connected. And a lot of times, again, because of the kind of energies that we're all contending with in a very busy world, we can get easily caught up in those negative loops, and we can get easily caught up in our own thoughts that just kind of run away into the anxiety-filled or depressive sort of filled thought processes, right? So I don't know, maybe you can talk a little bit about the meetup stuff that you do then, because I do feel that the community element and that finding those connections and people where you can, help to boost your ability to find the happy thoughts, Peter, right? Peter Pan, thinking about Tinkerbell, right? So talk about your meetups and what you do at your meetups and the meetings that you have, so that if folks are kind of looking for a place where they can find people that they can have these conversations with and maybe get a little bit of help with their positive mindset, where can they go?
Yeah. Sure. Well, first, I'll comment on what the Buddha said about community. He was with Ananda, was his faithful attendant monk. Ananda said that having good friends along the spiritual life is half of the spiritual path. The Buddha said, not so, Ananda. Having good friends along the spiritual path is the whole of the spiritual life. So the Buddha definitely did emphasize community, spiritual community. They don't just do it alone. It's the people you associate with. And also in the Magala Sutta, the Buddha said, the highest blessing of life is not to keep company with fools and to keep company with the wise. So yeah, the community around the people associated with it is of really great importance. Yeah. And with my meetup group, I find a lot of people find community, which is like cyber community online, especially in the ET field. Like people have had like ET experiencers often have no one to talk to in person, or their family and friends can't relate to it. So a lot of them have these support groups online, like there's experiencer support group meetups just for that purpose. So I find with my meetup, it's called Preparing for ET, contact at meetup.com. A lot of us feel a sense of community is mainly just in cyberspace. Even in the city of Vancouver I live, it's only a few people I know in the UFO community that I meet up with in person. So for me, most of my communities in cyberspace are like people like you two, for instance. That's my main sense of community. Yeah, so the meetup group, I first started in 2009. I changed the name. Now it's called Preparing for ET Contact. It used to be just Vancouver UFO, and then it morphed in different directions. Yeah, so my inspiration comes from various people like Susie Hansen's a big influence on me. So the part of the philosophy of the meetup based on Susie Hansen. I got her book here, The Dual Soul Connection.
Oh, very cool.
Yeah.
I'm going to have to get that. Like, that's a beautiful image on the front there. I love that.
Yeah, she'd be a good guest as well. And I was introduced by experiencer here in Vancouver, Jeff Silver. He's got a book too, The Rising. So I first met him 4 years ago, and he's got a relationship with the Greys, and he's had many contacts with them. And he was the one who first told me about Susie Hansen. She's more well known about it. So our meetup is basically based on that kind of worldview that, the Greys are good. The Greys, I think, have an unfair negative reputation of kind of gray alien. And the Greys and the Mantids seem to be like the architects or the project managers or the leaders of this. And there's evidence that they have these huge, like city-sized motherships in orbit. Some of these have been known even by American intelligence since the 1950s. So, and Susie Hansen has been right inside these crafts. So yeah, we like to interview different people on the theme, either experiencers or researchers who talk about particularly what's the alien agenda for human advancement, like why are they here, And I think the ET hybrid program is largely sort of the big reason behind it. I think they're gradually hybridizing people. Susie Hansen has said in one of her interviews with Karen Swain that around the year 1850 was probably the beginning of this more recent process, like the human hybridization program. It's probably more recent since the 1800s. It's not something that's been going on constantly for thousands of years. So just my own theory, they probably came like during the time of Cro-Magnon man and tweaked us to be like Homo sapiens. And now they think, well, it's time for another tweak. We're not providing proper management or stewardship of the earth. So we need a more evolved human with quantum dimensional consciousness, meaning in tune with higher realms of existence, and a human with the ability to have telepathy and more of a spiritual orientation in life. So it seems like this is where humanity is going, the whole future of humanity. Homo sapiens sapiens is being changed to the humanity 2.0. So
I love it. I'm excited for the next evolution.
Yeah. So I think this is a good thing. And I've been studying, I've been reading recently, like Bud Hopkins. He came up with the first book in 1981, Missing Times. He was the first one who really discovered this, and they're talking about it more since the Benny and Barney Hill case in 1961, which was regarded as kind of a one-off case. But Bud Hoffman's in his studies, he's quite negative about it. He thinks they're going to take over the world, and he worked closely with David Jacobs. They both had kind of a negative feeling. This is a takeover of our planet. But they did a lot of good pioneering work and really good case studies. And then John Mack is a psychiatrist at Harvard University, had more of a positive view, and he regressed a lot of people. So he went into a lot more depth. So John Mack really helped to sort of reform people's attitudes about it. So yeah, I'm part of this evolution since the 1980s of studying these people and their thought and how thought changed. But there's still lots of, I guess, misunderstandings about the Greys, a lot of sort of negative impressions like the media has, I guess.
Yeah, and we do. I mean, obviously, we have all of our Independence Day type movies, and popular culture has a lot of things to frighten us about aliens. But right. I mean, listen, I love that movie. It's one of my favorites from back in the day, and I love Will Smith in there. But does still have that very aliens are coming to eat us all kind of vibe, and they're not. Right.
The idea of hybrids in Independence Day. Remember the guy who flew this plane into the UFO and blew it up? So he was
Randy Quaid.
He was an example of alien abduction. So remember at that time I watched the movie when I was in Thailand in 1996, and so no, they were referring to alien abduction. At that time I knew about it. I hadn't really studied it until like 10 years later. So even that was part of our pop culture, but it was regarded as kind of a negative thing, a really weird thing.
Right.
Yeah. But
it's getting more groovy and people can talk about it a little bit more. I did want to ask you, just because you mentioned it, and I know we're kind of coming up on our time here. I'm watching it, but you did mention the mantis beings, and we did have like Tony on recently who speaks with like the mantis beings, and I know that they are also involved in the alien human hybrid program, as in, again, in my understanding, the so like the Greys and the mantis beings is in the rabbit holes I've gone down anyway. And so tell me what your perspective is again, but that they kind of work together in this program. And if you can maybe talk about, like, in my understanding, they're kind of overseers or like the genetic engineers kind of.
Yeah, I think to quote Richard Dolan in his book, Alien Agendas, he says, the mantids may be the highest intelligence humanity has yet encountered. And he said, you don't usually see the boss on the factory floor. Many people see the Greys more often, but the mantids are off to the side, but they're always in charge. Whenever the mantids are seen with any other E.T.s, they're always in charge. So they're probably the highest. Like, just my own research, I think the mantids could be like billions of years old, as old as the solar system. And my theory, which I'm getting from Jeff Silver here in Vancouver, he feels mantids are like the gurus of the galaxy, and they bring life across the whole galaxy. So I think like all of life on planet Earth may have been brought by the mantids, beginning billions of years ago. And from one example, this around 520 million years ago was called the Cambrian explosion. And science can't explain why all these huge animals and plants all kind of exploded within a 10 million year period. Like, how did they evolve so fast? So my theory is probably the mantids brought them to Earth at that time during the Cambrian explosion. There's no scientific evolutionary experience of how all these creatures came so fast in such a short period of time. So I think that's probably the function of the mantids. And I interviewed this one woman in Ohio, Christina. She's had a relationship with the mantid where the mantid seemed to have taken her emotions. And on the Zoom, Jeff Silver was saying, well, probably the mantid needed it on another planet. They kind of mix and match and move things from one planet to the next. And they're geneticists as well. Like, genetics is their thing. And also the Greys, they're all about the DNA and creating different types of creatures and what's suitable for this planet or that planet. So probably the life throughout the galaxy. And just talking about this one galaxy, I don't know about, there's 3 trillion other galaxies. But that's probably how it works. There's some organizational structure, and the mantids could be at the top of this. There might be some higher intelligence above them, something like godlike or ethereal or AI or something. But yeah, I think, and also I've interviewed people like Donna Lynn in California. She's had a relationship with one mantid, and she experienced tremendous amount of love you feel from these beings, like overwhelming kind of powerful love, even though they look like a praying mantis. Like, Jeff Selber said his first time he met a mantis, said this very visceral kind of reaction. They're very scary looking creatures, like a praying mantis, like 7 feet tall.
Yeah.
But they're highly intelligent, and they can even send these packets of thought information that goes into people's subconscious when they're teaching. Like Susan Hansen's been in these lecture halls on these huge craft, like with 250 people, and the mantis would send these thought packets into people's subconscious minds, which would give them information later in their life. Like, it's highly sophisticated telepathic communication. So
yes, I have been in those ships. So
wow.
Yeah. Oh, there's a lot of E.T.s. You should see the interview I just did the other day. Anyway, we'll talk about that.
I put a pin in too many exciting things.
I can interview you, Glenn, on my show sometime. Yeah.
There you go. There you go.
Yeah, highest respect for mantis. I think they're also spiritually evolved. Like, as a Buddhist, we kind of defer to senior monks as their spiritual guides. So I sort of transpose that onto the Greys. There's also called the ancient Greys, a type of old stock Grey who are like the spiritual teachers for the Greys. And
well, I believe those are the taller Greys. The spiritual ones. Greys. The smaller Greys are more like the grunt work.
I was going to say, okay, that's getting more information that I didn't quite have. Like, okay, so there's the short Greys and the tall Greys.
Yeah. But there's also ancient Greys, like old stock Greys with a folded, wrinkly.
Yeah, like very wise looking. A good picture as an older, wise person. Very calm, and you could just go near them. And you could feel that energy. It just calms you down, no matter what it is that you're doing, what you're feeling. It's just like, oof.
Good. Yeah, and the other Greys defer to the ancient Greys as their own spiritual guides. So you see, it's a spiritual society, a hierarchical spiritual society. And they're more telepathic, so they're all sort of a group mind, a group mind, not hiding secrets from each other. But I think it's important, at least I emphasize the spiritual nature of the E.T.s. It's not just like they're highly advanced technically, but I think they're more spiritually evolved beings that haven't blown themselves up, and they're kind of managing life of the galaxy.
Hey, maybe we should talk to them just a little bit. Thank you for looking out for us so that we don't, blow ourselves up, because we as humans like to make things go boom, do we not?
Yes.
I do feel like that good reason for all the E.T.s to be watching us, considering we have that tendency. Thank you again, y'all out there, for just keeping an eye out once the kids found the matches, i.e. nuclear technology.
Well,
right?
Yeah. And they always show up at the most opportune time, the time that we need the most help to kind of change our direction a little bit.
Yeah.
It's kind of like even, South America with all the Incas and all that. They talk about the perfect timing. They showed up when they needed the most direction, when they needed the most guidance, when they needed new knowledge.
Yeah.
And, so
that makes me think of like the origin story of the Incas, I believe, is like an original 8 gods. And you guys were talking of the Council of 8 just before now. I know we don't have a lot of time to get into it, but is this a cliffhanger that we need to bring Brian back and talk about?
Probably
do we have to talk about some H? It's a cliffhanger. You guys, you want to hang out? We got to get Brian back. We need to talk about these ancient cultures
specifically. I've watched hundreds of videos by Linda Moulton Howe, and her sources say that the E.T.s took people from Nepal and brought them to South America. They were the Incas, and then at some point they took them away. The Incas disappeared. Right? We don't know what happened to them. Right. So she thinks they probably just took them to another planet, but they originally came from Nepal. The culture seemed quite similar.
Yeah, that I've heard that too. So where could they find you? Your websites? I'm going to put them up.
Yeah, well, my main source is my BitChute channel, bitchute.com. I got a Brian Rube channel. I got 3,500 videos going back to 2011. But my website, I got universitygalacticus.org and brianrube.ca. So people can just Google my name, they can find me. But those.
And it's also in the description. So if you miss it in the video, it's always in the description. You know how I do it. So
you know how to do it. Go click the links, you guys. Go check it out. You want to see more of it. University Galacticus just sounds super fun to me to say. So I just definitely want to go check that out. Y'all meet me over there on campus.
Well, it's been great to meet you both. I really appreciate it.
Thank you. Well, we've met before.
This has been well, you haven't met me. This has been rock and rad for me. I'm super excited to have you back again. I feel like we could fill another couple of hours, so you may be roped in for just a few episodes again.
Exactly.
You didn't know you were going to have to spend so much time with me and Glenda, but turns out.
Oh, it's been fun.
Turns out we're just roping
very
in.
much. And we, as always, say good night. Bless you all. Thank you for being here with all of us. Remember to like, subscribe, and share, because the more people know, the better it is for us all humans, right? Because we raise our vibrations, we raise our consciousness, we help each other in one way or another. And as always, thank you, Brian. Thank you, Haleigh. Love you all. Bye.
Big love, everybody.
Yeah.